Hello! If you're a GURPS player, you probably are aware of Dungeon Fantasy RPG that is powered by GURPS. That is a standalone version of GURPS Dungeon Fantasy that doesn't even require you to have a GURPS basic set or any other rulebooks. Many believe that this is a good starting point for GURPS players who come from D&D, and that may be true, but I don't know, honestly. What I do know is that there are actually many differences between the rules from GURPS basic set and DF RPG. Some major ones, such as the new slam rules, are talked about online, but some of the minor ones, I have never heard anyone mention them. So I decided to read through Dungeon Fantasy RPG Adventures, Dungeon Fantasy RPG Exploits, and GURPS basic set side by side and compare them. I will ignore Dungeon Fantasy specific new rules that you can usually find in the Dungeon Fantasy books and focus on the differences between the generic mechanics. I'll go over advantages first, then disadvantages, then skills, and then the generic rules. So let's start. Animal empathy lets characters with this advantage make penalized reaction rolls against genuine monsters. Discriminatory smell notes that the +4 bonus is applied when detecting poisons. Hard to subdue is worded more clearly. Now it states clearly that this advantage adds to resistance rolls against unconsciousness and sleep. The latter wasn't mentioned in GURPS basic set. There is also a night ability called Rallying Cry. It isn't present in any of the mainline GURPS books and even in the Dungeon Fantasy books, but it is almost equivalent to the Natural Leader advantage from Pyramid 365. The only difference is that the Pyramid version has Voice advantage, give +1 to the roll, despite Voice being present in the Dungeon Fantasy RPG book. It doesn't give a bonus there. The recovery advantage in DF RPG works not only against unconsciousness but also against sleep. Resistant in DF RPG is not a generic advantage anymore, but two specific advantages, resistant to disease and resistant to poison. Both of them cost 1 point per level and add +1 to resistance rolls. So the leveling scheme is completely different. Also, in GURPS basic set, disease and poison belong to different rarity categories, but here they cost the same. The Sacrificial Parry perk in DF RPG is not limited to allies beside you. You can parry an attack aimed at anyone within your weapon's reach. Also, shield defense bonus yours or your friends never counts, which isn't specified in the GURPS version. The Very Rapid Healing advantage in DF RPG works differently. Instead of doubling the natural recovery rate, it multiplies any healing, as if you had 10 more HP. GURPS Monster Hunter's Power-Ups 1 has a similar optional rule, but also makes it a leveled advantage. That's it for advantages, but the disadvantage section actually has many more changes. Berserk adds the following. If for any reason you end up in a posture other than standing, you must use the change posture maneuver to stand as soon as possible. This was missing in GURPS basic set, and if a berserker would get tripped or would fall or knocked down, he would have to remain lying down. Gallows says that it is mutually incompatible with charitable and selfless. This is missing from GURPS basic set. Disciplines of Faith has mysticism add a penalty to notice danger and a bonus to be noticed, and Ritualism does the same but halved. Frightens Animals adds a -4 penalty to animal handling and disguise animals. Greed and Intolerance have expanded modifiers. Klutz states that the GM must make the roll in secret. Total Klutz limits its effects to non-combat rolls only. Laziness is expanded a lot in DF RPG. Lecherousness expands the disadvantage with reaction penalties and resistance penalties to sex appeal and seduction. Miserliness adds a conditional reaction penalty. No sense of humor adds a carousing penalty. Paranoia adds attention penalties and bonuses. Phobia expands the modifiers. Social stigma criminal record now imposes a penalty on many roles in town. Stubbornness was completely reworked. This disadvantage now has a self-control number and is tied to the complementary roles and some other rules. For example, if your ally is trying to help you with a complementary role, you have to roll a self-control roll for stubbornness, and if you fail, you tell your ally to kick rocks and do the thing your own way without benefiting from the complementary roll bonus. That's it for the disadvantages. Let's take a look at skills. Body control allows you to treat your own injuries, stop bleeding, cure disease, and even treat mortal wounds, not only flash poisons. Boxing removed the penalty to parry kicks. Carousing introduced new modifiers for spending lots of money. Cloak, now ready in time, is given in the skill description instead of being hidden away in combat rules. Also, Cloak is clearly stated to have no offhand penalties. Counterfeiting has a new use, recasting precious metal items as ingots. For the escape skill, any critical failure to escape the bonds inflicts 1d HP injury. In GURPS basic set, you damage yourself when intentionally dislocating a joint, and the damage depends on the degree of failure. Fast Draw Potion I think exists somewhere in GURPS, but I don't think I have seen Fast Draw Scroll before. Gambling has a new use. This skill can work as detect lies in situations where you suspect someone is bluffing about their odds. Holdout, instead of descriptive categories for modifiers, has modifiers based on weight and reach. Judo skill is slightly altered. Judo throw can be only performed on an opponent who has no more than twice your ST. This is a generic rule that is often forgotten, so it's nice to have it spelled out here. In addition, note that in an all-out attack you cannot attempt 2 throws but can make one attempt at +4, got replaced with all-out attack you cannot attempt 2 throws but all other options remain open, which implies that now you can make a judo throw as an all-out attack strong. What would the effects be? Damage in judo throw appears in GURPS martial arts but not in the base book. Knot tying has a new use, making an improvised lariat from a normal rope. Lifting is mechanically the same, but is worded very differently in DFRPG. While before this was a quite strange skill, here you can see that this is actually just a trained application of extra effort for lifting purposes. This description seems much more clear. Light walk. When minimizing weight, maximum move is 1/3 normal rounded down. Rounding is not specified in GURPS basic set. Lockpicking in DFRPG is a dexterity average skill that defaults to dexterity -5. The description says that peculiar mechanisms may require IQ-based rolls instead. Basically, this is the inverse of the skill from GURPS basic set, probably because simple dexterity-based locks are much more prevalent in dungeon fantasy. Meditation seems to have removed the lengthy concentration time. Mind block has been reworked from GURPS basic set. Instead of rolling once per minute or rolling once per second in combat, you roll after failing to resist any mind-reading ability as a second resistance quick contest. If you roll a critical failure, you lose and reveal 1d extra pieces of information of your opponent's choice. Unlike in GURPS basic set, this version doesn't provide a list of positive and negative modifiers, so you can sort of combine the options. Parry missile weapons has clearly stated weight limits for heavy and light thrown weapons, and also states that you can parry missile spells without a modifier. Pharmacy in DFRPG has clearly defined brewing times for poison antidotes and disease cures. Poisons in DFRPG has a new default, Alchemy -5. Pressure points has been reworked, effects are actually different. The only identical effect is that of a limb hit, the rest are different, and I think you can safely combine the two versions into a single skill, if you want to. Scrounging has a new use. Roll after a battle to recover some of the arrows and other projectiles used. Speed reading has a new use. Identifying written spells takes less time. Tonfa is worded better here than in GURPS basic set, using the rules from GURPS Low-Tech and GURPS Martial Arts instead. And there is one skill-based rule that I haven't seen anywhere. You never gain a combat skill's special benefits, like superior retreats and parries for fencing skills, or unpenalized offhand use for main gauge, when using a skill at the default. You must spend at least 1 point on the skill to gain these benefits. I looked everywhere and I couldn't find it in GURPS. Now let's go over the generic rules changed. These are the most interesting ones. First, aim. Now, something that pops up often in my games is clarified. You aim at a specific target, person or object, not a specific body part. All-out attack in Dungeon Fantasy RPG has been changed slightly. If you elect to move, you must do so first and then attack. Also, you may not change your facing after completing your move. In GURPS basic set, you can technically, by rules as written, attack and then move forward for half your move. All-out defense has been changed slightly. If you choose all-out defense increased dodge, you may use movement points equal to half your move rounded up. This unusual rounding wasn't present in GURPS basic set. I'll also come back to this maneuver a little bit later. If you are burning and want to extinguish your clothes, the rules are different in DFRPG. If all your clothes are aflame, you can drop and roll as a single change posture maneuver without any rolls. In GURPS basic set, this used to require a dexterity roll and take 3 ready maneuvers. In DFRPG, you can also extinguish yourself by beating the flames with your hands. This takes 3 ready maneuvers if you're fully aflame, and a dexterity roll. This wasn't possible in GURPS basic set, you can only drop and roll, or jump into water. Cloaks. A failed cloak block amounts to a botched unarmed parry with a hand holding some flimsy cloth. Against a melee weapon, failure lets the attacker choose to hit the original target or the cloak arm. And no, the cloak doesn't give the arm extra DR. This is something totally new. Now, diving for cover. Defense bonus of your shield or cloak is not applied when diving for cover. Effects of injury. Reeling, as in being below 1/3 of your HP, halves your move and dodge, instead of move and basic speed. While this has the same effect on dodge, it will not affect your position in the turn order if you start a fight while reeling. Evaluate maneuver isn't even present in DFRPG. Interesting. Rules for firing upward and downward were simplified in DFRPG. Instead of calculating the distance differently, now you apply a +1 or -1 bonus or penalty, or a doubled one for steep slopes. If you have grabbed the opponent's weapon, he cannot use it to attack or defend. This isn't present in GURPS basic set. Grappling in general has been reworked, and quite significantly. First of all, finally, the head is defined as a single hit location for the purpose of grappling. I have seen many times people trying to grapple face or skull, but now it's clearly defined as head that is targeted at -3, just like in Fantastic Dungeon grappling. Remember the -4 penalty to dexterity for being grappled? In GURPS basic set, it is applied as a general penalty if you have grappled the torso, and if you have grappled a different body part, the victim has -4 to dexterity only when using that body part. The last part even is italicized for extra emphasis. In DFRPG, however, this -4 to dexterity applies regardless of hit location, but if you grab a body part other than torso, the opponent cannot use that body part to attack or defend in addition to the general -4 to dexterity. The cannot attack part does exist in GURPS basic set, but is hidden under actions after being grappled, but the cannot defend part seems to be new. Also, there is something else new. You get +3 to takedown rolls if you have grappled the opponent's leg or foot. When breaking free from a grapple, you can step immediately. In GURPS basic set, this is move 1 yard in any direction, which is slightly different. Lariats. The only defense against a lariat is a dodge. In GURPS basic set you can parry too. There is some new stuff too. A tie means you keep your weapon, but your enemy is free to move around within its length. This isn't present in GURPS basic set. Also, running is clearly defined to be moving faster than a step, which is nice. Nets. First of all, a large net requires 2 hands to ready but only 1 hand to attack. This seems to be missing from GURPS low deck at least. And the rules for nets in general in GURPS basic set are barely functional. I strongly recommend you to use the rules from DFRPG, or to combine them both into a single whole. The first difference is that the only legal defense is a dodge, while in GURPS basic set you can also parry it and even damage it when parrying with a cutting weapon. The second difference is that destroying the net works differently. Instead of attacking the net and depleting its HP, you simply have to take 3 ready maneuvers to cut yourself out with a rich C cutting weapon. Alternatively, with a single ready maneuver you can win in a quick contest of strength versus 14 for a melee net or 22 for a large net to burst it. Picks replace all mentions of damage with injury. In this context, I don't think there is any difference. Also, I found some very minor wording change in the rounding. In DFRPG you round costs and weights up. In basic set you round up for point costs only. I guess that's it. The size modifier table in GURPS basic set and in DFRPG are slightly different for very small size modifiers. The DFRPG values actually correspond to the linear measurement values from the size and speed range table from GURPS basic set. So I guess the size modifier table from page 19 of GURPS basic set is actually wrong. Size modifier in DFRPG also is applied as a modifier to attacks both in melee and ranged combat. In GURPS basic set this is only a thing in ranged combat, but this was later reworked in the online FAQ and a Pyramid article. Even then, the maximum bonus for size in melee combat is +4, but it isn't present in DFRPG. Also, in DFRPG this is an absolute bonus, not a relative one. Slams. This is the most notorious change between the books. As per DFRPG, damage calculations for slams works in the following way. If you hit, you each roll your thrust -2 crushing damage on the other. As well, look up how many hexes you ran this turn in the linear measurement column of size and speed range table, and add the corresponding size modifier to each die of damage rolled by both sides. You can use all-out attack strong to increase your damage. Whoever rolled lower damage must make a dexterity roll or fall down, and falls automatically if the higher damage roll was at least twice as much. Personally, I haven't tried these rules yet, but I've heard that they work much better than the ones in GURPS basic set. Some slam-adjacent rules have been reworked too. When performing a shield rush, now you add the shield's defense bonus to your damage roll and subtract it from your target's damage roll. Also, nothing is said about your shield taking damage of the slam. Pounce works slightly differently. Now, if you knock the victim down, you may claim a free grapple. This is a huge bonus. The hit location is not given, however. Also, flying tackle doesn't exist in DFRPG, so I wonder if this free grapple also applies to flying tackles. Speed penalties. There is this interesting thing in DFRPG. Ignore target speed except when your target is taking an all-out defense increased dodge maneuver, or using move maneuvers to sprint or tumble. Then add speed in yards per second to range in yards and look up the total in the speed range column to find the penalty. Don't look up range and speed penalties separately and add them together. Torches work a little bit differently. Torches and other incendiary weapons deal 1 point of follow-up burning damage instead of 1 point of linked burning damage. This change probably stems from the fact that linked attacks do not even exist in DFRPG. Trampling in DFRPG has the following. when someone is knocked down by a slam or overrun, and the attacker keeps moving, trampling is automatic. Don't make attack or defense rolls, just roll trampling damage and half it. In the basic set it was the following. Do not make any attack or defense rolls, roll damage immediately based on half your ST rounded down. In one case damage is halved, in another ST is halved. I prefer the DFRPG version as it is much easier to calculate. And finally, whips are worded slightly differently. Anyone injured on the arm or hand by a whip must roll against the will modified by the shock penalty for the injury or drop anything in that hand. In GURPS Basic Set the wording is less clear, as it says that any whip blow is painful, but the roll is required if the victim takes a whip wound, which is not a mechanical term but a descriptive one. So that's all I could find. I probably have missed some minor things. Overall, I like most of these changes. I think that many of them can be backported to GURPS as errata, and I will definitely use some of them in my games from now on. If you want to simply read the list of changes, you can read it on my blog, the link is in the description. In any case, thank you for watching, I will see you next time.